All right, it is time to get started this evening. Thank you for coming out tonight to enjoy our presentation. This is our 10th annual ArtPrize panel discussion. And as you can see up on the stage, we have 3 artists who have joined us who will share their work tonight. I'm the moderator for the event, Nick Antonakis. I'm the Visual Arts Department head. Just a word about the Visual Arts Department. We have what is called NASA accreditation, which is a national organization that accredits art departments, art programs at college and university level and at art schools. It's a stamp of quality, and it makes sure that you keep up the good work that you do with your students, and we're really proud of this accreditation that we have. I also want to mention before we get started that we do have 2 venues on campus. One is the Collins Gallery, and the artists that you see here are showing in the Collins Gallery, so I hope that you will take the time to visit if you have not done so yet. And the second venue is the GRCC Spectrum Theater, and we have a lot of artworks there too, so hopefully you'll visit that particular venue too on campus. I have a couple of images very quickly. I wanted to show works by other artists who are showing in our gallery. And this is a work in photography by Christy Lee Rogers called Muses. This one is by Dan Rule, and it's called Cave. It's a video. This particular piece is actually longer, but I could not access an image that had the lower part of the body. So you'll have to come to the gallery to enjoy it, okay? And it opens up the central panel, and you see the sticks, and then it closes up. So you can actually view it in multiple ways. This is by Molly Corrival, and it's called Sticks and Stones, Bullets and Guns. This one is by Jay Constantine, The Poisoning of Arius, and Jay is here on closer to me, in other words, to my right immediately, okay? Hi, Jay. And he'll be talking about this work and probably others too tonight. This particular piece, or series of pieces, they're claymation by Jonathan Lopez. He's on the far end of the stage, and he calls himself the Clay Alchemist. Bright Eyes is this year's presentation in our gallery. And last but not least, Kristen Casaletto with her multi-piece mixed media drawing, and I think it's watercolor, colored pencil, and some other things. You'll talk about it. And this is called The Fall. Let me tell you a word or two about the artist before we get started. This is the embarrassing moment for the artist, and I apologize, but I copied it directly off of the ArtPrize site. So Kristen Casaletto, forgive me if I'm reading, but I don't remember all of these things, uses drawing, painting, printmaking, and at times sound, sculpture, video, monumental scale, and collaborations to confront issues of class, race, gender, power imbalance, and conscience. Casaletto exhibits nationally and internationally and has won awards, grants, and residencies, such as those from Pyramid Atlantic Art Center in DC, the Georgia Humanities Council in Atlanta, and the Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop in New York City, among others. Her art is in various collections, such as the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and the Edith and Eli Broad Museum of Art in East Lansing, Michigan. Please feel free to come on in. It's not an issue. Thank you, thank you. She holds a BFA in drawing, a BS in physics, the MA in art history, and the MFA in painting and printmaking. Next, we have Jay Constantine, and I think I guessed the order that these artists are going to be presenting. So we have a long list here. Maybe I'll read. I don't know if I have a microphone over there, but I can probably do this, right? It's going to be easier than craning my neck. Jay's from Cleveland, Ohio, and he received a BFA at the Cleveland Institute of Art and an MFA from Northern Illinois University. After living in Chicago briefly, he took a full-time faculty position at Kendall College of Art and Design. He was the chair of the painting program for 10 years, and he was instrumental in establishing the MFA program in painting and also the BFA program in painting. Jay has received grants from Arts Midwest, Regional NEA, ArtServe Michigan, the Michigan Council for the Arts, and the Arts Foundation of Michigan. He is also included in the NEA Fellowship Archive at the Smithsonian Institute. His art has been exhibited in numerous solo exhibitions and has been published in Direct Art magazine and most recently in Studio Visit magazine. Jay's work is also included in several public collections, such as Grand Valley State University, Kalamazoo Institute of Art, Grand Rapids Art Museum, Muskegon Community College, Pratt Graphic Center, as well as in private collections. And third, we have Jonathan Lopez. I should tell you that Jonathan completed our photography program at GRCC, so he is an alum, by the way, and he's done very well. Ever since he was here, actually, he started doing works like this, and he continued on after he graduated. Jonathan's work is created out of plasticine, also known as modeling clay. It is a medium that he has worked with since he was a child, and he never grew tired of it as he's able to shape and reshape it for years. He likes to sculpt anthropomorphized animals and food, as well as human caricatures. During ArtPrize 2014, he displayed I'm Not Myself at the DeVos Place, and he was featured in 2 ArtPrize curators' lists. During ArtPrize 2015, his project Clay List made the top 25 time-based entries. And during ArtPrize 2017, he was awarded an ArtPrize Seed Grant to create Closer to Family. Let's give a hand to our panelists. And I really appreciate that they're willing to share their work with us tonight. We will start with Kristen, and I'll bring up your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hi, GRCC. I'm really happy to be here as part of ArtPrize, and I really would like to thank Nick Antonakis for curating me into the show. And also, I'd like to thank Scott and Jamie for their expertise and help in the gallery as well. So it's a pretty good challenge to try and convey some small taste of a long art career in just a few minutes like we have tonight with any sense of meaning. And so I thought, well, if I had to say something about my art in just perhaps 2 sentences, I think at the moment I could say sentence 1. My current art tends to explore socio-political challenges that are facing the United States in its role as one of the last standing superpowers, because I'm interested in the implications of what it means to be a superpower. And sentence 2, I use media-wise drawing, painting, printmaking, sometimes sound, sculpture, sometimes video, sometimes monumental scale, and even collaboration sometimes to confront issues about class, race, the things that Nick was mentioning, power imbalances in a way, and ultimately it tends to be about conscience for me, observations that stem from my position within working class America. So I'm interested in the potentials and the pitfalls of power, in the development of societal and personal ethics, things like justice and injustice, issues of conscience, even the line between sanity and insanity, and I guess more broadly in what aids in making us most fully human, or maybe impediments that keep us from being most fully human. And you'll notice a lot of these things are not visual things that interest me. So I've gradually had to develop a sort of a visual language to deal with these notions, visual strategies that tend to inform my work. And so today, let's see if I can, oh, yes, this works well. Thank you. Today, let's see. Given our time frame, I'm going to pick just 3 of the visual strategies in my work and talk very briefly about each of them. This is called Too Big to Fail, an artwork that uses all 3 of these characteristics, which are, number 1, the notion of accumulation tends to play a role as a formal strategy and as a symbolic strategy. Number 2, the overlay of historic references onto the present as a way to look at things holistically, perhaps. And thirdly, a sense of adventure or humor even with materials. So touching first on accumulation as a visual strategy. When I think of accumulation, and I'm just going to do this sort of stream of consciously, I tend to think of accumulation or accretion, increments, baby steps maybe, effort over time, plotting, perseverance, summation of days into a life, or a rolling of individuals into a society, parts into a whole, tiny parts that can influence the whole, the repetition of ritualistic action, distribution of pressure across many points or across time and space. And not everyone's mind works that way, but those are some of the things I think about accumulating over time. And many of those ideas are in this piece for me. So here in Too Big to Fail, you have an image of the American flag. It's made of locusts that are suspended in pigmented encaustic wax. So the gestalt of it is kind of beautiful, I think, and it's richly textured, but up close, it's actually kind of creepy. A lot of my work lately seems to play that edge between attraction and repulsion. And to me, I moved south, I'm up from Georgia, and there are a lot of locusts there. And locusts are magnificent. They're like mini dinosaurs. They're huge in Georgia. They're beautifully constructed, they're agile, they're strong, they're a perfect part of the ecosystem. They provided sustenance to certain Great Plains Native Americans. A single locust is really beautiful, I think, and well engineered. But their accumulation can become a menace. In numbers, they become a swarm, the very symbol of plague scale destruction. Therefore, the locust, to me, as a symbol, straddles the great and the terrible. They're used to depict the flag, speaks perhaps to a nation at a crossroads. Will we choose sustenance or destruction? The actions of individual citizens, I believe, will matter deeply in the coming times and the present times. I believe there's patriotism in this image. Maybe I should go back. It runs the gamut, though. There's beauty and strength and optimism there, as well as doubts and premonitions. Some of those same ideas are in this piece calendar, but I sent my PowerPoint before I revised it, so I'm going to skip that for another time. Whoops, what have I done? Here we go. Let me jump to my second visual strategy, because another thing that accumulates over time is the weight of history. So I turn now to my second tendency, implying some kind of overlay of history as resonant in the now. And this isn't an interest I initially had. It started for me when I moved 1,000 miles from the upper Midwest to the deep South. I went to Biloxi, Mississippi, and I found, boy, did I need to understand the shaping influence of a place's past on its present. And I'd never heard of people talk about the Civil War before, but I began to see its influence, and that was important. And Jefferson Davis began appearing to me in various guises, as here. This is one of a number of intaglios involving Confederate President Jefferson Davis that examine hope and loss of dreams in America. He had a few too. Here's another piece. It remodels Richard Hamilton's famous Collage, you might be familiar with it, of almost the same title. But now the modern convenience products of pop art are replaced with the media sound bites of conflict to allude to violence as covered by the media sometimes. The Tiananmen Square tank there at the bottom with the lone man, the cannon shooting instead of the vacuum cleaner of Richard Hamilton. And the two main figures are sort of far too comfortable and kind of business as usual amidst this backdrop of war. I have another similar ideas here, but let me skip that one too. I want to strictly stick to my 13 minutes. So I was also making work related to Emmett Till, the unfortunate 14-year-old Chicago boy who was lynched and murdered in 1955 while visiting family in Mississippi, and whose grisly death helped launch the civil rights movement. And I was doing works about Emmett Till actually long before the controversy around Dana Schutz's portrait of Emmett Till. I don't know if you were following that last year at the Whitney Biennial. And so I was really quite interested in the dust-up in the media about that piece, and there were some very legitimate issues raised in that conversation. This is too short a talk, but we do have Q&A time or time afterwards, so if you want to talk about any of those things, that's fine. Let's talk about them afterwards. But meanwhile, let me jump to my third artistic tendency. Actually, this one's kind of the conclusion of my second tendency. Here's a piece called Apocalypse that followed really straight out of my anguished longings for justice, so that never really came, over what happened to Emmett Till and others somewhat like him. And my art had gone into some kind of straight up apocalyptic vengeance of the gods world. This is very large and very dark. And obviously I'd worked myself into a fairly dark corner. And I thought, oh, I need some change. I think I decided I needed to let some more humor into my work, let some different materials come into my work. And I changed jobs approximately at this time, and I moved to Georgia and began having reactions there. And I was going to play more with, let my sense of humor come to the forward. I was also becoming interested at the time in the selfie phenomenon. Here's a jump for you. The selfie seems to be one response to the enormous cultural shifts happening right now in America. Americans' the portrayals of themselves seem to have changed from prior presentations, and I got interested in tracking that because it seems like we used to have the rugged individual personification, or that kind of idea for Americans, kind of personified by John Wayne here, independent, self-reliant, active, tough, resilient, outward-looking to the horizon. But the selfie seems to have evolved away from this kind of rugged individual idea, inwardly focused now, lots of lens and mirror gazing, rather than outward to the horizon. Dependent now on constant validation, on acknowledgments through likes, and so on. So it also seemed to kind of feed into that male gaze concept that maybe you guys are reading about in art history class. It seemed kind of in a way like woman as meat. And maybe we should expect that. In Augusta, Georgia, we were having debutante balls, even still, and I found that very interesting. So I made this piece of a woman wearing a 1950s debutante ball gown, and it's etched into a canned ham that I got at the grocery store, which is painted and scraped to form stripes, and then handwritten text on the white stripes is excerpted verbatim right out of a Joy of Cooking cookbook, and it's an explanation of how to tenderize meat by smacking it around. Its juxtaposition with the bell changes its meaning, and it now kind of reads as an irreverent description of woman as meat. And I did this kind of thing as I was wondering why the selfie image is often put out by women themselves in this way. And it's a kind of a branding thing, I suppose. It's fine. But I wondered, how would I like to brand myself in a selfie? Probably not as meat, but maybe as power. That would be fun. Although I guess I'm looking pretty meaty here in my self-portrait as Big Fat King. Oh, and it is very large. There's an installation shot. This is kind of selfie as personal imperialism. It's in your face, it's taking up the whole picture plane, and it's wearing a better outfit than anybody else in the room. And thus began my series of self-portraits as America, which play with contemporary possibilities for the portrait genre. Now, these evolved quite rapidly. Whoops, there's a detail. It was fun to draw the fabrics. I love to draw. So they evolved pretty quickly. Here's one in which my face cast is mounted on a bed of materials that suggest instant gratification and things that are fleeting, such as chocolate sprinkles, artificial silver leaf, a Hostess cupcake is in the bottom middle there, coconut, daily newspapers, much, much more. So essentially it's a vanitas piece. You might have studied that in art history class too. It investigates impermanence and what we're feeding ourselves culturally. Well, these continue to evolve, and I thought, what if my selfie consists of simply displacing my body mass and setting it down in various places? Like, can I literally throw my weight around? That would be fun. And so this is indeed my body weight in Twinkies. It is stacked like gold bullion at Fort Knox, and I've recast myself as a consumerist ziggurat. And it was initially displayed with a performance piece in which I gold-plated my legs and did some other things. So let me finish. I'm trying to stay right on schedule here. Let me finish with this piece. I'll leave you with this. This is called Muncie, Self-Portrait as the Propagation of Average. And you can see a red dart impales Muncie, Indiana on a US map made on a bed of Twinkies, belted, surrounded by tar. I did live in Muncie for 5 years. I went to Ball State University. And there, everyone is well aware of the 1929 sociological study that names Muncie as Middletown, USA, by showing it to be the most typical small town in America, or as we in Muncie all like to say, we are the most average. So being quintessentially average seemed to imply inertia or settling or being officially utterly unremarkable. We were the regular citizens, and I am one, you know, the sort that's in the news today as supposedly driving our current national scene. So I was using this suite of about maybe 20 works that merge so-called high and low art materials and imagery in a sort of a send-up of a post-philosophical, selfie-oriented society, and as a basis for examining a contemporary American culture, examining contemporary American culture, complacency, and conscience. So using those three visual devices and others, but accumulation, historical reference, and fun with materials, I make work that points toward a possible danger of creating a culture that may propagate a certain myopia or self-centeredness or complacency that asks a viewer to think about whether such traits may be more dangerous now than at any prior time in history. That's enough. I think those are enough thoughts for now. Thank you very much, and I will turn it over to my next esteemed colleague. And I do have my apples pictures here, if you need apples pictures.
Well, thanks. Let me see, where's our clicker? Okay. I guess what I'll do is, since we have the slides in a certain order, I'll talk to you a little bit about the piece I have in the gallery. Maybe I'll have a chance to show you a few other pieces I've done in this series. You know, I have been, for some time, exploring, I guess I would say, some of the conflicts that I've perceived in religion in general, but historically in Christianity in particular. my interest is conflicts between science and religion, and also I've had a desire to sort of investigate early conflicts between heresy and orthodoxy, just to sort of educate myself. As I started the series up, I began to realize that I had, probably some different views. In a lot of cases, I found myself really sympathizing with so-called heretics. Heretics, of course, are people that deviated from strict orthodoxy, and in many cases, of course, they paid for it really dearly. And so I decided to do a series of sort of revisionist pieces where I could explore history, but sort of pick it apart and fragment it in a way where I could insert some of my own views. I'm not going to hide from the fact that many of the pieces are meant to be critical of certain policies of the church in the past. And also, of course, I am also looking at maybe recreating a kind of history painting. I am very interested in that, and I'm also interested in a kind of bringing a didactic element back into art. Now, in the modernist point of view, didactic art, narrative art, historical painting, that was all sort of out during most of the 20th century, in favor of usually formal qualities, form, color, composition, things of that sort. So I kind of am sort of deliberately being a bit backward looking here and saying, I want to re-examine this history and really try to see what it was all about. In this case here, my piece, The Poisoning of Arius, is in my studies I found, as I've said before, certain heretics very sympathetic and interesting when you really get behind a lot of what was going on at the time politically. It's really intriguing. It's not as clear cut as people think. So many of us have grown up reciting the Nicene Creed and don't really realize the controversies that were there behind it. Arius was I guess what they call a presbyter. He had some status in the church. He attended the Nicene Council, and in fact, the first Council of Nicaea was called to deal with the Arian controversy, although he's not the one that created it. There was a controversy that had been going on for some time. In fact, if you really do the research, you realize that in the first 2 centuries of Christianity, there were a lot of different forms of Christianity. I mean, I put the list together here. I'm not going to read it. But there is a whole list, a long list of very, very different interpretations. But of course, a lot of that got stamped out when, of course, Christianity became the official religion, or even when it became tolerated with the Edict of Milan. But anyway, I wanted to dig back into those things, and definitely with a critical view, not just to accept the official story or the official history, but to kind of get in there and dig around and find what I could. So anyway, we have this Council of Nicaea. It was to determine, it's of course it's a what do they call it, a fait accompli. It's a done deal. But at that time, there was a lot of conjecture about the nature of Jesus, and I should mention, I am coming from an atheist point of view, but anyway, a lot of this was in discussion at the first council. What an interesting council. So this council gets held, and they're going to decide, okay, was Jesus of the same substance as God, or was Jesus a subordinate creation of God? Kind of interesting. And I mean, it was a violent situation. In fact, it's kind of funny. I was just rereading some passages where the famous Saint Nicholas, who was a bishop at the time, actually assaulted Arius during the proceedings and was sent to jail. That's how crazy this situation was. So you have Arius, who is coming across with his ideas. I guess one of the other things that I'm very curious about is, who were these heretics? Were they evil people? Were they bad people? Were they just wrong? And of course what you find out is in so many cases they really had scriptural backing. They weren't just making stuff up. But again, the majority, of course, crushed a lot of these views. And of course there were 7 basic ecumenical councils, and all of them were because of heresies that were so-called heresies that were cropping up. Anyway, Arius, after the council, his work was considered heretical, and it was burned, and he was sent into exile. But after a time, the emperor invited him back into the church in the interests of unity and because there were so many people who believed in Arianism. Kind of interesting because, Isaac Newton was an Arian. There were a lot of them at the time. And of course, especially during the Enlightenment, so many of people had definite questions about the divinity of Jesus. So anyway, he is invited back into the church by the emperor, and on the eve of his communion, he dies. Now, there's the Patriarch Alexander was supposed to receive him for communion, and of course, the Nicaean Christians were outraged that he had been invited back into the church. They just wanted this guy to go. And what had happened is that the Patriarch Alexander, who was supposed to receive him for communion, it said that he prayed all night that this whole situation would go away. That's how bad. And we're not seeing a lot of forgiveness with these early church fathers either. In fact, when you examine some of them, they were amazingly cruel creatures in some case, really tough customers, not real forgiving. But anyway, so he spends the whole night praying that Arius is just going to disappear, and lo and behold, he dies. He was poisoned. This is where my history painting becomes a little speculative. It's not proven that he was poisoned. But it's interesting that the day before he gets communion, he's dead. When they describe his symptoms, they're awful. Now, I kind of made it sort of nice that he's just sort of, throwing up a little blood. But the fact is, he died in a bathroom, and with basically his intestines coming out of him, and basically he kind of blew up, which doesn't sound to me like a regular visit to the bathroom. I think it's, obviously, although it's said that no one knows for sure, I'm thinking to myself, oh, come on. The day before he receives communion, everybody hates him. They don't want him back. And then suddenly he explodes, okay? So, I was interested in that, and I felt a certain sympathy, and because after all, he was a very devoted believer. Like a lot of heretics. They're not like atheists. Of course, he didn't have atheism, really, or Satanists or anything. They just had different ideas. So I was very interested in that controversy. I'm very interested in how it plays out today. We're sort of lucky these days because, there's a lot of different points of view as a result of the Reformation. Due to the Reformation, we have things like a Unitarian church, which doesn't believe in the divinity of Christ or the virgin birth, or for that matter, did I say it, the Trinity? I can't remember if I said that or not already. But anyway, at this particular time, it's life or death with these beliefs. So what I tried to do is I put together certain things. I took images from the Pompeii murals, and because I really wanted to get this combination of Christianity and paganism. And by the way, that's what several recent scholars really say is part of the real tension in Christianity, is that it's kind of, when you get down to it, it's a combination of Judaism and Hellenism. No other Abrahamic religion, such as Judaism or Islam, believe in God's coming down in human form. That, in many ways, is kind of a pagan idea, even though in pagan culture, gods might have relations with humans and produce a demigod. In this case, of course, it's producing a god-man, but it's awfully similar sounding. So anyway, I used a lot of the images from these Pompeii murals, including in the center architectural elements, but I also included some of the images of the Nicene Council, which were made, not too far from the actual time. It's really kind of fun to immerse yourself in this, because as I'm researching and enjoying the history, because I'm a major history buff, you can also get back into the images of the time and see. I can see the Nicene Council. I can see that they've got areas under this edifice, and it's interesting to see. In this case here, I used the Pompeii architecture in the center circle, but then cut out the shape to put him at the bottom dying. And I took that also from the Nicene Council. So I have images, and of course there are some rather disrespectful portrayals of some of the council members, which is to give the work a kind of sarcastic, edgy quality. But anyway, that's the basic story, and I thought it was interesting enough to portray, and I wanted to do something, perhaps to show the heretic as a kind of anti-hero or a fallen hero, that they stuck to their point of view. They just had different beliefs. How am I on time? Another minute? I'll just run through a few of the quick. Again, you can kind of see some of the painting going on there. By the way, you can look my website up if you Google J. Constantine artist. I think it's www.jconstantineart.com, but I've got all kinds of text with it too, going over the history. It also shows you the size. I wanted to show you real quick my piece, the first one that I did, and this is this one here, of course, is the Massacre of the Cathars. Again, this was something that happened in 1209 when Pope Innocent III decided that there were a bunch of Gnostic Christians living in the south of France who didn't believe a lot of things that the Catholic Church believed in. And he sent an army out to kill them all, several major towns in France. And of course, they were very ascetic, gentle, peace-loving people. They were, really did not deserve this, but they were slaughtered. And of course, this is appropriated from drawings and paintings from the time. And we have Pope Innocent over here, as well as some of the castles, the Cathar castles. It's funny, the Cathars are so romantic now. They actually have tours to view the Cathar castles. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, just to give you an idea. And I probably am on my limit now, right? Okay. All right, sorry, I feel like there's a lot more I could say, but I don't want to take up anybody else's time here. So thanks a lot, and if you have questions, feel free to ask, and I guess we'll be around a little bit to talk about it later. Okay?
Oh, that's weird. Back. There. There. So I'm really glad to be back here for the second time. I was here a couple years ago for ArtPrize. Like Nick was saying, I was a student here. I studied in the photo department for a couple years, and I actually graduated with an Associate of Arts. But the time that I spent here in the photo department was essential from moving me from the stop motion field that I was in, which is very primitive. This was, back in 2007 when I was a junior in high school. Digital was, just like a new thing, You know, you didn't have stop motion animation software out there really like to the masses until then. And I saw it was almost my style to do white on white, which was incredibly lacking dynamic character. And it wasn't until I came here and I started experimenting with color. Well, actually, that was my last year in high school, but I came here, you know, to our photography program, and Professor Millard actually, he really disliked my photography for the longest time. It was really uninspired. It really wasn't what I was passionate about until I think about halfway through the class, I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot putting one of my characters into still work. And I really started honing in on the miniatures, kind of utilizing like a little Nintendo DS in the background there, playing around with the title of this one was called Board Games. And so I developed that, and he says to me after class, he's like, you got to keep doing that. And I'd never seen such a strong reaction to my work before then. I was like, shoot, I actually have something here for once. And the funny thing is I actually dropped out after, I think after Jonathan's class, I took a couple years off. And I did 30 days straight where every day I sculpted, photographed, and published a character. And I just loved the simplicity of shooting on white. For the longest time, all of my characters were shot on white. It was just so that I could work on the actual process of sculpting and figuring out armatures. When I first started out the project, I actually was just using toothpicks for armatures. And by, I think, like day 5 or 6, I went to the hardware store, bought myself some floral wire, and I started bending them together and actually getting some more dynamic results. Back even like a few weeks prior to this, I couldn't even have a character standing up hardly. So it just goes to show that when you dedicate a little bit of time to your craft, it's amazing how much you can accomplish in 30 days. Unfortunately, that it was originally going to be a 365-day project. I fell on some black ice, and I was done for about 2 months after that. But thankfully, I did come back to CC. I took Filippo's class, a couple of his classes, and he was really, really generous and just kind of let me kind of go with the flow of wherever the clay took me. And I started honing in on how I wanted to develop lighting, and I started working with bigger and bigger characters. This is from a couple years ago, of course, during the election, and it's a little more edgy. I generally, I like to create my own characters. I don't like to take anything from real life so much. So, getting out there and being a little less political, but still revolving around the press. I spent some time here in the journalism department too, so I got a little twist for that these days. But this is the project that I'm working on now. So I mean, if you go back and compare, well, actually, I don't need to go back because I got another picture coming up. But the advancements that I made in the past year and a half to making sculptures that were in a medium range to now full size or bigger than life has been so fulfilling. The whole reason why I made this project was to develop, just to develop my craft. There's a lot of photographers out there that just do portraits. And I'm such a control freak. I got to control the subject, I got to control the lighting, and I like to take the photographs. So it's 100%. I love to make my characters and bring them on location. I don't like to use Photoshop a whole lot aside from tonal curve adjustments and white balance. But this is influenced by 1972 Cosmopolitan centerfold of Burt Reynolds, and R.I.P. Burt Reynolds. But it was a bit sad to find out that he died last month. This is really what has made me happy this year, is that back in 2012 when I first started that 365 project, which only lasted a month, I was working on characters that were 7-8 inches. And in the past, 2-3 years, I'm finally pushed myself through that, that barrier to making bigger and bigger artwork. And this character is like about 50, 60 pounds. And it's just a lot of fun developing these characters and bringing them on location and seeing people, seeing what sort of reactions are elicited from just seeing the actual tactile nature of it, not just creating it in the computer and keeping it all digital. So almost like going back in a time machine and going back to the fundamentals of my childhood. And that's why I use plasticine in the first place. I absolutely love the childish nature of plasticine. Which if you don't know what plasticine is, it's just modeling clay. You can get it over at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or wherever. It's just, a children's plaything. And I like the fact that you can take something so simple and go further with it. And it's like I just never grew out of it. It's something that you use in claymation, and it's turned into the medium that I use for all of my artwork. And it's just, it's a bit sad for some people to find out that my work is melted down when I'm done with it. But the cool thing is that clay is turned into the next character and the next character. And it's also nice that it's reusable from the aspect that we aren't wasting a ton of product here. So I hope to be using the same clay in 20 years. Just keep using it, and not only that, it saves me some money. So there's no losing here. And I just the ultimate goal of mine is to see the photograph. I don't want for you to come along and see the sculpture in person, because it's not where it's supposed to be. I'm an illustrator. I'm not a sculptor. That's why I look at it. And in the next year, I hope to take these skills that I've learned in the past 6 to 8 months, and I want to delve into more of projects that are examining our society as a whole. And I'm a happy-go-lucky person. I really enjoy just making people laugh, and because the clay and the plasticine come across as more childish, I feel like I can approach some of the topics that are a little more uncomfortable. I really want to look at the ideas of unions and of riots, and why are people upset these days? And I find that with clay, with my characters, it's disarming. I can approach any topic from any opinion, and it's not so offensive. So it's one of those things where I'm not sure where it's going to take me, but I keep writing them down in my book, and I'm just going to keep up with that. But I'm not sure exactly if there's much else I want to say. I just thought I'd keep it kind of brief with the process, and I think we'll go to Q&A.
Once again, thank you to all the artists. And now we are at the point in our presentation where we can ask some questions of the artists. Maybe you have thought of some. I'll bring out the mic so we can hear you. And you can address your questions to all three of the artists at the same time, or a single artist at a time. So it's really up to you. Anybody? Not everybody at the same time, please. Yes.
Favorite part of the process for each of you, from start to finish? The beginning and the end, favorite part of the process.
Or are we starting with me? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Duh. I have to admit that the painting itself is the part that I enjoy the most, but I don't know if that's really true. Because I think it's the researching and the designing, the thinking through of the format. It's almost more fun because you don't have to have a end product where you feel you've maybe failed or haven't quite, but just the idea of doing all the reading and then generating the sketches and thinking through, it's really, I think, where I really have my most fun.
Is this on? Can you hear
It
this
is.
through this? Okay.
It is.
Favorite part of the process? I think the best part of the process is when you're all done and it worked. Art is lots of work, and I think there's that part of agony in many of the pieces. Sometimes mine are kind of complicated and sometimes gigantic, and often I jump into them and I just don't know if I'll be able to do it. And so there are moments of doubt and that painful birthing your art kind of thing. But there are also, and I guess these are the favorite parts, those great moments when you lose all track of time and you're in the flow and you're not consciously connected to your thinking, judging part of your mind. You're in the materials and you're instinctively moving to the whatever. You're solving things, you're creating things, and you've had it. You're art people, right? I mean, it's good when that happens, you know, and when everything you make is feeding into the next thing you make, and there's no external factor, your gallery dealer or your professor or something saying, hey, you need to do this by Wednesday. You're internally motivated, and everything you're doing is generating your next pressing desire to do the next thing, and that's my favorite part. So.
Well, my favorite part is actually coming up with the concept as a whole, coming up with the characters. Just in my head, there's so many different ideas that I have, and it's like I keep going back to characters that I've had even in my sketchbooks for like 8 years, and it's a good feeling when you have an idea that's so hard that you can't do it currently, because it gives you something to look forward to. It's a real bummer when your entire summer is spent on a project that you knew that you could get done, because it's like, you know, you haven't pushed yourself hard enough. It's almost a bit of a bummer that none of my characters, you know, didn't turn out this year. Like, honestly, it's like there's a reward in failure, and it's like inside my mind there's so much more possibility than what you can put on, you know, on the print, I guess, or in the sculpture. So I always look forward to the next project, and it's like I'm already looking forward to, you know, next year and the year after that, and, you know, giving myself bigger and bigger challenges.
Thank you. Another question? Over there.
I was wondering if any of you guys go through periods where you are feeling unmotivated or maybe uninterested in art, or maybe you are motivated and interested, but the ideas just aren't coming to you. What do you do to get past that in those times?
Well, I think everybody's kind of been through that. I think everybody's had a slump. And, you know, for me, I mean, I don't know where I heard this, but, you know, sometimes maybe it was, I don't know if it was Bob Dylan or Willie Nelson, said that sometimes you just have to let the well fill up again. You know, in other words, don't stress yourself out about it, but do some reading, do some traveling, you know, and let yourself kind of absorb some experiences, because, you know, if you force it, it's not going to happen. But I think it's a great time to take a trip, you know, road trip, or go somewhere. Again, reading, and again, not pushing yourself so hard, because the well does fill back up. You get new experiences and new ideas, and I think that's the way I handle it. And then, of course, it's just great, you know, when you're on fire, you know, and you're just, you know, every time you finish a piece, you're ready to do the next one. That's great. That's what I love. That's like heaven, you know, really, for me. It's just, I love that, you know. But,
Okay, yes, we all have those periods of time. All you artists know that things happen sometimes. What do I do? I think it's good for people to examine, well, if you can, often the reason that you're having burnout or failure to have ideas is external to you, like maybe it's overwork or outside pressures of actual life, because, you know, the artist wants to hole up and just make things all the time, but, you know, there are those bills to pay and that family to interact with, and there's some reality to keep you busy. I think it's good to, a couple of things, know your own temperament. As an artist, you're in a tough profession and a competitive profession, and it's not a money profession necessarily, so you would do well to examine why you do this periodically and not at the same moment that you're making your art. I think it's good to try and balance action and contemplation, even in your studio work, and take some time once in a while in a pace that works for you to step back and consciously think about what are you doing, critique yourself, get some other critique, and it could be a whole life critique, like feed your soul a little bit. Why am I hung up? Am I just worried somebody's going to think my art is bad? You better let that go and just get busy and practice more, because somebody's always going to draw better than you or something. It's the art world. But you have something to say that's authentically you. Have you found it? Can you find it? Are you looking in the right direction? It's good to step back and intentionally assess once in a while. I feel, I don't know how you guys feel, I feel it's not good to make those judgments at the same session as your active making. Like make without, was it Larry Bird, way back in the basketball days, that used to say, you don't have to think about the game when you're playing it because you've run all those drills. You live it, you're in it, and you know what to do because you've built your skill set and you know what you're about and you do it. So I think there's a lot, I'm not a great athlete, but maybe you are, and I think there's some of the same potentials in internalize it, live it, but then step outside and judge it once in a while. So I'm in one of those phases right now, having moved, a self-assessment period. I think it's good, and I'm just about ready to wrap that up and get busy making now. But I also think there's micro assessments too, like day to day. You guys are in school, so you have a lot to balance. It can be as easy as go run around the block once, go outside in the backyard and curse a moment and let it out, whatever. And then get back to your studio and get busy making, whether you feel like it or not, because an artist has to make all the time. So, gee, that's enough. Okay, I'll let John go.
So my thing that I've come to realize, like the past year, is don't take yourself too seriously, because if you take yourself too seriously, it puts you in a real predicament. It's like with me when I am just like stuck, I like to go back and it's like, I mean, I do have tons of old ideas, and I have that huge like list of write-outs of things that I want to give a shot of. So luckily I have that. A lot of people don't want to work that way. They want to be more spontaneous. I'm just not spontaneous really with it a lot of the times. I don't know. I would say also make work you don't want to share. Exercise. Do literal exercises for art. You can't go wrong in practicing. There's nothing wrong with that. And I've heard a lot about writers. I can't remember which podcast it was, but they were talking about one of the really famous writers back in the day. He was walking something like 20 miles a day. He was just coming up with his books, and it's just like sometimes you literally have to just be. You just have to be, and you just have to be content with that, and to understand that things aren't going to come to you, and then just suddenly it will. And I don't know. It's you're just gonna have dry spells, and you just gotta accept it sometimes, and just don't beat yourself up over it.
Thank you very much. Very thoughtful responses, and I'm sure that there are more questions, but we have run out of time. We do have a small reception in the lobby, and we can join the artists and ask more questions, so I hope that many of you will stay around for more. And in a couple of years, hopefully we'll see you here again for another ArtPrize panel discussion. Let's offer a hand for our panelists, please. Thank you, and have a good evening.